All right, ready to jump into something pretty fascinating. Today we're going deep on the Science of Identity Foundation.
SIF.
SIF, yeah, founded by Chris Butler,
Oh, yeah, this guy.
who also goes by Jagat Guru Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa.
That's a mouthful.
Just a bit, yeah.
What's really caught my attention in all this is the back and forth between SIF and other Gaudiya Vaishnava groups.
Oh, really?
Like, specifically, B.V. and Narayana Maharaja's Gaudiya math.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
talking about people like Krishna Karunya Das,
Okay.
who was Mahabhava Das in SIF.
Gotcha.
And then you've got Mirik Mazur,
Yeah.
who went from High Das in SIF to Madhavananda Das. It's like people are switching teams.
It is a little bit like spiritual musical chairs. What makes someone leave a group they were so dedicated to and find a whole new spiritual home? That's what we're trying to figure out. So to start, let's rewind a bit. Who is Chris Butler anyway? Where did he come from?
Well, would you believe it? Surfing in Hawaii.
That's right.
Yoga teacher and surfer turned spiritual leader.
Wow, what a story.
It is right. Butler's early days were all about ice skate con. You know, the Hare Krishnas founded by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Right.
But then he ends up branching off to form SIF.
Hang 10 to Hare Krishna. That's quite the change. So was this split from ISKCon amicable?
Not really.
Oh.
Butler claimed he was the only true representative of Prabhupada.
Oh.
And that caused some serious friction within ISKCon. That claim and some of SIF's practices are really at the center of all the controversy.
Okay, so before we get into all that, what is SIF? What do they believe? What do they do?
Well, at the core, you've got meditation, studying Butler's teachings, and this whole pursuit of becoming a pure devotee. But one thing that's interesting is that Butler became increasingly isolated over time. He mainly communicated through recorded lectures.
So no FaceTime with the guru. Interesting.
Yeah, and that separation, between the leader and followers, that's something you see often in groups that people say are cults.
Really?
It can stop people from asking questions and creates this aura of unquestionable authority around the leader.
Huh. Starting to see a picture here. Let's dig into the controversies then. What are people saying about SIF?
Well, there are serious allegations that SIF operates like a cult. We're talking identity destabilization and controlling members' lives.
Intense. But let's not make any judgments yet. What are some specific examples? What did people actually experience?
Right, good point. Some people describe this pressure to conform, to shed their old identity and take on a new SIF-approved persona. Others talk about restrictions on relationships, jobs, even contact with family outside the group.
So it's more than just spiritual teaching. It impacts every part of their life.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's a major sign of what people think of when they hear the word cult.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got these allegations of cult behavior. What else is controversial about SIF?
Well, they're involved in a number of businesses, Down to Earth, the health food store chain, and Wailana Yoga.
Interesting.
Yeah, this blurring of religious practice and business has raised some eyebrows about their financial transparency.
Interesting. Is it common for religious groups to have businesses?
Not unusual, but the problem here is the lack of transparency and the potential conflicts of interest.
Makes sense.
Is it about spiritual well-being or profit? And how does that impact the members? Those are the big questions.
Yeah, okay. And then there's this guy, Alan Tibbiacharya Das in SIF.
Oh, yeah.
Heavily involved in SIF projects, the Australian School of Meditation, but later faced accusations related to QNet.
QNet, a multi-level marketing company with a pretty shaky reputation. They've been accused of being a pyramid scheme in several countries, taking advantage of people hoping for financial success.
Hold on. So a major SIF figure was allegedly involved with a company with shady business practices. That's pretty significant. It feeds into those worries about exploitation within SIF.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if there are similarities between the recruiting tactics and financial pressures of QNet and what some describe experiencing within SIF.
This is a lot. We're hearing about alleged cult behavior, financial shadiness, and connections to potentially exploitative businesses. It's a lot to process. But you mentioned earlier that some who left SIF joined other Gaudiya Vaishnava groups like B.V. Narayana Maharaja's Gaudiya Math.
Right.
Maybe looking into these departures will give us some insight into what pushed people away from SIF.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay. Who are some key people who made the switch and why?
Well, one of the most prominent is Krishna Karunya Das, remember him, Mahabhava Das back in SIF.
Oh, yeah, correct.
He actually wrote this whole letter explaining why he left, and he flat out said that he felt SIF lacked the depth of teachings he was looking for.
So he wasn't satisfied with the surface level stuff. He wanted something more intellectually stimulating.
Exactly. He found that depth in the teachings of B.V. Narayana Maharaja and his disciples. And what's fascinating is that it suggests that these different Gaudiya Vaishnava groups emphasize different parts of the tradition.
Okay.
Some might prioritize devotional practices, others might focus more on philosophical understanding.
It's kind of like different flavors at the same ice cream shop, right?
I like that.
You might love chocolate, but someone else wants pistachio. It's all ice cream, but with unique nuances.
Perfect analogy. And the fact that Krishna Karunya does specifically mention finding more living examples of the Srimad Bhagavatam within Narayana Maharaja's lineage is really telling.
Okay, I'll admit, my knowledge of Gaudiya Vaishnava texts is a little rusty. Can you remind us what makes the Srimad Bhagavatam so important and why seeing those principles in action matters so much?
Sure. The Srimad Bhagavatam is considered one of the most important texts in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's this huge collection of stories, teachings, and philosophical discussions all about devotion to Krishna. But for followers, it's not just about reading the words, it's about seeing those principles lived out in the lives of their teachers and fellow devotees.
So Krishna Karunidas was looking for a community that walked the walk, not just talked the talk.
Exactly. He seems to imply that he wasn't seeing that in SIF. This brings up the question of authenticity and how people see the alignment between words and actions in a religious group, which can be a big reason for staying or leaving.
It's about finding a place where your understanding of the faith feels real, right?
Yeah.
Where you see the principles reflected in what the community actually does, not just what they say.
Exactly. And that search for authenticity seems to be a recurring theme in the stories of other people who left SIF. Take Mirak Mazur, for instance. He became Madhavan Dadas after joining Narayana Maharaja's Gaudiya math. His case, while not as well documented as Krishna Karunya Das's, still shows this pattern of searching for a different experience of Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
So multiple people feeling like something was missing in SIF's approach.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling, don't you think?
It is. It challenges the idea of unwavering loyalty to one group or leader and highlights the individual's choice in shaping their spiritual path.
It circles back to those concerns about cult-like dynamics within SIF, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If people felt pressure to conform and not voice their doubts, it makes sense that they'd eventually look for a more open and fulfilling environment.
Absolutely. Remember those ex-members who described feeling manipulated and controlled? Those allegations are even more concerning now, considering these departures.
Especially the idea of identity destabilization we talked about. If you're constantly told that who you were before SIF was wrong or misguided, it could make you more vulnerable to the group's influence and less likely to question things.
Exactly. And when you combine that with the charisma and authority of someone like Chris Butler, who claimed to be the only true representative of Prabhupada, it's a powerful mix. It's not hard to see how people might be drawn into a system where disagreeing is frowned upon.
It's almost like a spiritual echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
You're surrounded by people reinforcing the same ideas, and any challenge to the leader's teachings feels like a personal attack.
And that's where the financial side of SEF, with its businesses like Down to Earth, becomes even more concerning. If people are already feeling vulnerable, they might be more likely to give money or work for these businesses without proper compensation.
Because questioning the finances would feel like questioning the faith itself.
Exactly. And this brings us back to that core issue of transparency and accountability. When money is kept secret, it can create a breeding ground for potential abuse.
And speaking of questionable financial practices, we should talk about Alan Acharya Das and his connection to QNet. It seems relevant now.
Oh, absolutely. QNet, as we discussed, is a multi-level marketing company accused of being a pyramid scheme. This kind of business model depends on recruitment, often targeting vulnerable people with promises of wealth and success, but often leaving them in financial ruin.
So the fact that someone closely associated with SEF was allegedly involved in this raises serious ethical red flags.
It does. It strengthens the idea that there may have been a culture within SEF's network that valued financial gain, even if it meant hurting others.
Wow, this is getting heavy allegations of cult-like control, financial shadiness, connections to potentially exploitative business practices. It's a lot to digest.
It is. But it's important to remember why we're doing this deep dive. It's not about being sensational or judging. It's about understanding complex situations and learning from other people's experiences.
Right. It's about critical thinking and making informed decisions.
Exactly. So let's step back for a second and think about this. Why should you care about all of this? What's the relevance of this deep dive into SIF and its controversies for our listeners?
It's a good reminder that we shouldn't just automatically trust any charismatic leader or organization that claims to have all the answers.
Right.
We have to be critical thinkers and question things, especially when it comes to groups that demand absolute loyalty.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like that saying, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. We need to be careful with groups that promise easy solutions or say anyone who disagrees is bad.
And this deep dive really makes me think about financial transparency, especially for religious organizations.
Yeah.
It's a big warning sign when money and spirituality are mixed together in a way that isn't open and accountable.
Absolutely. We've seen how a lack of transparency can create a perfect situation for exploitation. Asking tough questions about where the money's going and who's benefiting is essential, especially when vulnerable people are involved.
And we can't forget the stories of those who left SIF. It reminds us that it's okay to question things, to change our minds, and to find different paths if something doesn't feel right.
Yeah, our spiritual journeys are our own. We have the power to explore, to change, and to find communities that really fit our values and beliefs.
But let's look at it from another angle. We've been focusing on the negative stuff about SIF. But is it possible that some people genuinely benefit from being involved?
That's a good question. It's important to remember that there are always multiple sides to every story. We've explored the concerns and criticisms, but there might be people in SIF who have had positive experiences and find fulfillment in Butler's teachings.
So it depends on the individual's perspective and needs, right? What might feel controlling or manipulative to one person could feel supportive and helpful to another.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to avoid making general judgments and to recognize that people's experiences are complex.
I have to bring up the Gabbard family again. Their close involvement with SIF adds another layer of intrigue to this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a fascinating case study, especially Tulsi Gabbard Tamayo's political career. She's been both praised for her independent thinking and criticized for her past ties to SIF. It makes you wonder how religious beliefs influence political decisions.
It really does make you think about the nature of that relationship between SIF and the Gabbards. Was it just about shared values, or was there something more strategic going on?
It's a question voters have a right to ask. Transparency and accountability are crucial, especially when religious organizations could be using their influence in politics.
And Tulsi Gabbard's changing stance on certain social issues, especially LGBTQ plus rights, has caused a lot of debate. Given SIF's traditionally conservative views on these things, people have questioned how genuine her changing positions are.
It highlights how complicated it can be to balance personal faith with changing social and political landscapes. Public figures, especially those in power, are always under scrutiny for their past affiliations and beliefs.
So what's the takeaway? What have we learned from this deep dive into SIF, its controversies, and its connections to people like the Gabbards and those who left?
I think the main takeaway is that critical thinking and healthy skepticism are so important. We should question leaders who say they have absolute authority, be wary of groups that say anyone who disagrees is wrong, and demand transparency, especially when it comes to finances.
And just as importantly, we need to remember that our journeys are rarely simple and straightforward. People change, beliefs evolve, and it's okay to look for communities that truly support our personal growth.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, and we hope it makes you curious to explore these issues further. Remember, knowledge is most useful when we use it in our own lives and decisions.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the complex world of the Science of Identity Foundation. We'll leave you with one final thought. What would you look for in a spiritual community? What values and principles are most important to YU? We encourage you to think about these questions as you continue your own exploration. Stay curious, everyone.